It began with laughter. Not the warm, kind-hearted laughter that fills a room with joy, but the sharp, cutting kind that pierces through a man's dignity. On a crisp evening in New Orleans, at a high-profile charity gala filled with the city's elite, U.S. Senator John Neely Kennedy found himself the unexpected target of ridicule. The event was meant to raise funds for underprivileged music students, a cause close to Kennedy's heart. But that night, it became the stage for something no one saw coming. As the audience buzzed, a famous concert pianist known worldwide for his dazzling performances and proud demeanor took the microphone. He had been entertaining the crowd with his charm, his wit, and his music, when he turned to the senator seated in the front row. "I hear Senator Kennedy likes to play piano," the pianist said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Laughter rippled through the hall. "Well, maybe after a few lessons, he'll make it to the children's recital next year." The crowd chuckled. Cameras caught the smirks. Kennedy smiled politely, hiding the sting that burned beneath his calm expression. But what came next would transform that laughter into stunned silence and eventually, into tears. When the pianist finished his next piece, Kennedy quietly rose from his chair. He walked toward the stage, his southern charm unwavering, and spoke softly into the microphone. "Well, since we're here for the kids of Broken Bar, maybe I'll just give it a try." The pianist, half amused and half curious, gestured toward the piano with a mocking flourish. "Be my guest, Senator." What happened in the next 5 minutes would become one of the most talked about moments in modern American politics and music alike. Kennedy sat down, adjusted his glasses, and rested his hands on the keys. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. Then, with a deep inhale, he began to play. The first notes were tender, hesitant, like a whisper from a memory long buried. But as the melody unfolded, something remarkable happened. The music grew richer, fuller, heartbreakingly beautiful. His fingers danced with a grace that spoke of decades of quiet dedication, of nights spent practicing when the world wasn't watching. It was Chopin, a nocturne in C-sharp minor, a piece that demanded not just skill, but soul. Every note carried emotion, a regret, resilience, and something deeply human. The audience, once restless, fell utterly still. The famous pianist, standing by the piano, lowered his head in disbelief. Tears welled in the eyes of guests who had come expecting laughter but found themselves swept into the raw power of humility and grace. When Kennedy struck the final chord, the silence lingered, heavy, sacred. Then, as if the entire world exhaled at once, the hall erupted in applause. People rose to their feet. The pianist, red-faced, trembling, approached Kennedy and, in a rare gesture of humility, took his hand. "Senator," he said softly, "I owe you an apology." A broken bar in the lesson in grace. Later that night, clips of the performance began circulating online. Within hours, it was everywhere, millions of views, millions of hearts touched. Comment sections overflowed not with political debate, but with something purer, admiration. "This wasn't about politics," one viewer wrote. "It was about remembering that everyone has a story, a struggle, and a song." As journalists dug deeper, they discovered that Kennedy had, in fact, studied classical piano in his youth. He had stopped performing publicly decades ago, choosing instead to serve his community and his country. But music had remained his private refuge, something he turned to in solitude, away from the noise of Washington. The moment became more than viral. It became symbolic. In a world often divided by pride and ego, Kennedy's quiet humility reminded people of something larger, that dignity doesn't need to shout, and that true talent doesn't seek validation, it simply speaks when it must. Weeks later, at another event, the same pianist invited Kennedy to share the stage. This time, there was no mockery, only mutual respect. Together, they performed a duet, a powerful rendition of Clair de Lune, and the audience once again rose to their feet. It wasn't just a performance, it was redemption, grace, and unity wrapped in music. In interviews afterward, Kennedy reflected on that fateful night. "You don't always have to defend yourself with words," he said quietly. "Sometimes, you just have to let your actions or your music speak for you." And so, what began as a moment of mockery ended as a timeless lesson. Never underestimate quiet strength. Never assume someone's worth by the titles they hold or the jokes made at their expense, because sometimes, the person you laugh at today might be the one who teaches you what true greatness sounds like tomorrow. That night, John Neely Kennedy didn't just play the piano, he played the truth, and the world listened.